All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking Nelson Mandela's incredible reflections on the historic 1994 South African inauguration, and we're going to trace his profound, deeply personal journey regarding the true nature of freedom. We are really getting into both a massive historical shift and a deeply personal evolution here. Now, to really wrap our heads around the sheer magnitude of the text we're examining, we first have to anchor ourselves in a staggering reality: 30 years. Mandela spent 3 decades in prison before achieving this monumental victory. So when we read his thoughts on liberty, we have to remember they were literally forged in the fires of a 30-year captivity. We're going to trace a fascinating reflective arc today. We'll cover the dawn of a new nation, the deep scars of apartheid, the steep price of freedom, the meaning of courage, the burden of twin obligations, and finally end on the true nature of freedom. Starting with Section 1, the dawn of a new nation, the 1994 inauguration, Mandela actually describes May 10th as dawning bright and clear, marking just an extraordinary milestone in human history. The actual data behind this victory reveals a massive paradigm shift. After over 3 centuries, literally hundreds of years of white rule, Mandela's African National Congress Party secured an overwhelming 252 out of 400 seats in the very first democratic election in South Africa's history. It's just incredible. And the celebration itself? Absolutely breathtaking. Taking place at Pretoria's Union Buildings Amphitheater, the event drew dignitaries from over 140 countries. High overhead, Impala jets left these brilliant smoke trails in the brand new flag colors: black, red, green, blue, and gold. And in a moment that just gives you goosebumps, they sang both the old and new national anthems side by side. Even though neither group fully knew the other's lyrics, it stood as this massive, undeniable symbol of unity. There's also this incredible, almost poetic contrast in the setting itself. For decades, that sandstone amphitheater had been the ultimate seat of white supremacy. And then, almost in an instant, it transformed into this beautiful rainbow gathering of different colors and nations coming together to form South Africa's first democratic, non-racial government. Moving to Section 2, the scars of apartheid, a deep and lasting wound. Because, to truly understand the joy of that inauguration day, we have to look back at the brutal system of racial domination that came before it. Mandela is very explicit here. The system of apartheid, which was erected by white-skinned peoples against the dark-skinned peoples of their very own land after the Anglo-Boer War, was devastating. It formed the basis of one of the harshest, most inhumane societies the world has ever seen. He points out that this policy created a profound hurt, a deep, lasting wound that's going to take generations to heal. Which brings us to Section 3, the price of freedom, unimaginable sacrifices. Let's see how that immense suffering actually forged an unbreakable resistance. Standing there on Inauguration Day, Mandela felt completely overwhelmed with a sense of history. He incredibly, humbly states that he is simply the sum of all the African patriots who came before him. Giants like Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Chief Luthuli. These were men whose courage, wisdom, and unimaginable sacrifices quite literally paved the way for that 1994 election. And you can feel his heartbreak when he says how painful it was that he couldn't thank them and that they couldn't see what their ultimate sacrifice had actually achieved. But out of that tragedy, Mandela makes this striking observation. He argues that decades of brutality had an unintended effect. He says, perhaps it requires such depths of oppression to create such heights of character. Sure, South Africa is famous for the diamonds and gems beneath its soil, but he believed its absolute greatest wealth is its resilient people, who are molded by those very depths of oppression. And that flows right into Section 4, the meaning of courage, triumph over fear. Watching his comrades repeatedly risk their lives for an idea taught Mandela a completely new definition of bravery. He realized that a brave person isn't someone who just doesn't feel afraid. That is a myth. He famously wrote, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." A truly brave man is someone who actively conquers that fear, showing a resilience that completely defies the imagination. This connects deeply to his view of the human heart. Mandela firmly asserted that nobody is born hating another person because of their skin color. People have to learn to hate. And here's the beautiful part: if they can learn to hate, they can definitely be taught to love, because love actually comes way more naturally to us. Even in the grimmest, darkest times in prison, he'd catch a tiny glimmer of humanity in his guards. Just for a second. But it was enough to prove to him that human goodness is a flame. You can hide it, but you can never, ever extinguish it. Let's move to Section 5, the twin obligations, an impossible choice. We're going to look at the deeply personal, tragic toll this struggle took on his daily life. Mandela brings up this fascinating concept of twin obligations. In a normal, civil society, a man can fulfill two duties, his obligation to his family and his obligation to his people and country. But in apartheid South Africa, attempting to serve his community made it virtually impossible to be a proper son, brother, father, or husband. The personal transformation he had to undergo was just brutal. He didn't start out wanting to abandon his family, but look at the cost of the struggle. A law-abiding attorney was forced to become a criminal. A family-loving husband turned into a man without a home. A guy who loved life had to live in the shadows like a monk. He was ripped from his family to live a twilight existence of secrecy just to fight for basic human dignity. Finally, we reach Section 6, the true nature of freedom, an evolving hunger. Let's look at how his very definition of freedom shifted over time. It's so interesting to trace this progression. He wasn't born with a hunger to be free. As a boy running in the fields, he had the illusion of freedom. As a student, he wanted transitory freedoms, staying out at night, reading what he pleased. As a young man, he yearned for honorable freedoms, like achieving his potential. But when he joined the ANC, everything shifted. That desire for his own personal freedom suddenly exploded into a massive hunger for the freedom of all his people. And that leads to his ultimate philosophical breakthrough, the realization that true freedom cannot exist in isolation. He wrote, "Freedom is indivisible. The chains on any one of my people were the chains on all of them. The chains on all of my people were the chains on me." He literally couldn't enjoy the limited freedoms he was allowed, knowing his brothers and sisters were still in chains. Which leads to what might be his most challenging thought of all. He realized the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. Think about that. A man who takes away another man's freedom is actually a prisoner himself, locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. Ultimately, both the oppressed and the oppressor are robbed of their humanity. So, as we wrap up this explainer, looking back at Mandela's extraordinary journey from a boy in the fields to the leader of a free nation, I want to leave you with a real challenge. We've seen how freedom evolves and how it's ultimately a shared human condition. So, if freedom truly is indivisible, how can you live your life today in a way that respects and actually enhances the freedom of everyone around you? Keep that in mind and never stop learning.